Good evening, everyone. This is Judi Robinovitz, Certified Educational Planner, and I'd like to thank you for attending this evening's presentation about Florida's fabulous, amazing, unbelievable state university system. And we're going to talk about primarily, what does it take to get in and what makes each of these colleges special. We are broadcasting through Facebook and YouTube, and we are also recording. So there will be a recording available afterwards. There's also a number of downloads available that will reinforce what we'll be talking about this evening. And so at some point, after this presentation or during it, feel free to download all of these really valuable flyers. So quick map of our state universities, all 12 of them, all the way from the Panhandle down to Miami. And up until very recently, the Florida university system was actually ranked number 1 in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. That started just a couple of years ago, and they had it for a few years in a row. There will be a new issue of U.S. News College rankings coming out probably this coming week, and we'll see if it's number one in the nation. But one of the interesting things is that 4 of our universities have been named as preeminent state research universities. Which means that the level of research at these universities is above and beyond what most state universities are spending and accomplishing. So we go from relatively small New College in Florida, Poly, all the way up to University of Central Florida. So we have quite a range in size. But despite that range of size, the admission criteria are absolutely the same in the sense that it's your academics, your test scores, and then holistic information, who you are as a student, your extracurricular, your commitments, your contributions, that really are the pillars of admission to all 12 of our state universities. And there are some minimum eligibility requirements that you cannot get in without. The core requirements in terms of the number of academic units in each of the main academic areas, but there are also some score requirements. If your recalculated GPA, and I'll go over that in a minute, if your GPA recalculated is above a 3.0, then it doesn't matter what your scores are. But if your GPA is between 2.5 C plus and the B, then there are minimum requirements in terms of your SAT, ACT, and the classic learning test, which is actually new for Florida. Last year was the first year that we've included that CLT in terms of an admission criteria, and you will see what kinds of CLT scores admitted students had this past year. I'd like to just give you a quick overview of the admission statistics for all 12 state universities. These are mid 50% ranges for the students who got in as freshmen this year. I don't want you to think that, let's say if I take a look at UCF and it says for fall admission, that the range was 1,300 to 1,420. That doesn't mean 1,300 is a cutoff or that you have to have a 1,300. It's just telling us that 50% of the students who were admitted as freshmen in the fall had between a 1,300 and a 1,420. So 25% of the admitted students had higher than a 1,420, and another 25% had lower than a 1,300. And your chances of admission are actually stronger if your numbers, your GPA, as well as your test scores are in that range and preferably above the midpoint of the range. The acceptance column on the far right has a lot of data from last year, We don't have all the statistics yet in terms of the percent admitted. So you'll see those that are starred for, for last year's data, as well as, the several that have already calculated, for this year. So you can see that there's really quite a range, but I do want to take just a minute to tell you about the GPA. Because the GPA that you see here, whether it's actually the average GPA or the mid 50% range, is not a student's GPA on his or her transcript. Okay, all of our state universities recalculate that GPA. In fact, we do a whole separate webinar on how that actually works. But essentially, it is only counting your core academic subjects. So English, math, science, social science, world language, anything that is AP, IB, ACE, not all dual enrollment, but that varies by university. But basically, we are eliminating courses like, let's say, PE or art, that's not an AP, or driver ed, or theater. So those types of courses are being eliminated. And 4 points for an A, 3 points for a B. That's pretty standard. But the weighting is very different than you're going to find in most of our schools here in Florida. You get an extra point for each A or B or C in an AP, IB, ACE, or dual enrollment course that counts. Unlike, say, our public schools, where if I got an A in an AP course, I'd get 2 extra points. Here I'm getting just 1 extra point, and I'm getting a half a point for each honors that's an A or a B or a C. So the GPA that you will calculate is actually going to be lower than the weighted GPA on a public school transcript, and probably lower than most private schools, because most private schools don't give as much weight as the state university system. So I don't want students just looking at their transcript and saying, oh my goodness, I have a 4.37. That means that I'm probably going to get into FSU and I'm going to get into UF. You have to recalculate the way our state university system does. So you can see that we have a range of competitiveness as well. I've highlighted right now those that are much more selective in terms of admission, with places like UF and FSU. And then those that are slightly less, well, let me just say less selective, so that you can see that there's really quite the range from very, very selective to not quite as selective, which is great that our students here in Florida and out-of-staters as well have a wide range of choices in terms of the competitiveness of our 12 state universities. And all of them do have honors programs, and the way you get in and their admission criteria are slightly different, but you can imagine that they are, looking for students with higher grades and higher test scores. So in terms of applying to one of our state universities, all 12 of them for a couple of years now have actually been on the Common Application. Common App is a universal type of an application that is accepted by over 1,000 universities. Not just in this country, but around the world. It does include all 8 Ivy League colleges, most colleges that you've heard about, of the name brand colleges that are not on the Common Application. You're not going to see Georgetown, MIT, UCLA, any of the UC schools, but pretty much almost anyone else you could think of is on the Common App, which can simplify the application process. There is another major contender in the world of application platforms, and that's the Coalition application. Not one of our state universities actually requires the Coalition application, so I strongly encourage students to use the Common Application as opposed to a university's own application. And using a university's own application, like let's say FSU, and I could have picked any of them because all but UF have their own application. It doesn't make it less competitive to get in. So stick with Common App. It's the easiest way to apply. A major change this year for all of our state universities is now every single one of them has an early deadline. Some of them are the familiar early action that so many other universities have. In other cases, it's just a priority deadline. And of course, when you apply through an earlier deadline, your chances of admission are generally higher, and often your chances for things like, say, scholarship, or on-campus housing, although you need a separate application for that, those generally improve your chances. I want you to notice that there are some of our colleges that have an early deadline of October 15th. That's just a month away. That is the earliest that is allowed for any college to have a deadline. But I would urge you, for instance, if you're looking at FSU or UCF or FAU, please get your application in by October 15th for those. In fact, you want to get it in before the deadline. Don't wait until the night before, and don't wait until Halloween to submit your application to, say, Florida Gulf Coast. And sometimes scholarships are tied to these particular deadlines. One of your handouts is actually contains virtually the same data as this. That's probably the first one that's listed in the downloads. So you'll have all of this data along with the information about deadlines and even notification dates. So most of our state universities don't look for the official transcript at the time of application. Instead, they look for an online form. Almost all of them use what's called the SSAR, and I'll show you what that looks like. The Spark is something that is unique to UCF, and you may also find that you're applying to other state universities in other states, and some of them have something called the SRAR. That is exactly the same thing as the SSAR, just it's a different name, but it's exactly the same. And if you do an SSAR for one school, it can be used for any school that requires SSAR or SRAR, and vice versa. There are two of our schools that don't do the SSAR, Florida Gulf Coast and Florida International. So if you want more information about the SSAR, you may want to take a picture of this screen. I've given the link to the SSAR where you can create it for any one of the colleges that needs it. And then there is a Q&A to answer any questions that you actually have about the SSAR. And again, it is the same as the SRAR for many other state universities. The Spark works in a pretty similar way. There's a link to its instructions, and you do have to actually submit your application before the early action deadline for UCF, and you'll be getting an email from UCF which has a unique link for you. Don't use someone else's link for the Spark so that you can start filling that out. And to give you an idea of what, for instance, the SSAR looks like, and the Spark has, similar qualities to it, where you're basically entering for every grade, every single course, every high school course that you have had. And this goes beyond just core. You'll be adding your elective courses as well. And just to give you an idea of how FSU actually looks at the SAR, this is what FSU sees. It's color coded so that they can tell at a really quick glance, wow, this is a kid that actually has a fair number of much more challenging courses, because we see the pink and the green and the blue and not quite as much, of the yellow. So at a glance, FSU can tell, how strong that student is academically. And having something like the Spark or the SSAR does help a university make admission decisions a lot more efficiently, because they don't have to waste the time themselves calculating, the GPA. So now let's get into the individual schools, and I'm going to be doing them in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with FAMU, our state's historically Black university. In fact, it's the only historically Black university in the state university system. It's in Tallahassee on the highest of the 7 hills, and it is the only city in Florida that actually has 2 state universities, because just a couple miles away is FSU. So of the 107 historically Black colleges and universities, that's that abbreviation HBCU, in the country, FAMU is actually number 3. That's pretty amazing. Some very famous alumni, as you can see. And one of the things that FAMU is best known for is their phenomenal marching band that has played at the Super Bowl and even presidential inaugurations. So some pretty cool stuff about FAMU. I think the most cool thing is that it shares a College of Engineering with FSU. It is actually on the FAMU campus. So FSU students who are engineering majors or taking engineering courses are coming to FAMU to take those courses. It's been around for about 40 years, and it has a very wide range of academic studies. And it's incredible. You'll see later how highly ranked that sort of dual College of Engineering is. I wanted to share with you some of their strongest and most popular majors. Several of them have, I'd say, are more competitive in terms of admission, like nursing and architecture and engineering, and a few programs that are pretty unique to FAMU. Relatively new on campus is their administration building. It's pretty gorgeous too. And next year they will be opening 700 more beds on campus. You know, our state universities don't guarantee housing. Housing applications generally have to be submitted separately and after you apply. And so it's pretty wonderful that FAMU is adding 700 more beds for next year. Now moving to something that's a little bit more local to me in Palm Beach County is Florida Atlantic University. And there are a few things about FAU that I think I am most excited about, and they are all related to their pre-health programs. They have one of our nation's few, there's not that many of them, combined BSMD programs, which basically means you're not, if you get into this program, or they actually have 2 programs at FAU, one on the main campus in Boca and one on their honors, the Wilkes Honors College up in Jupiter, is that you don't have to go through the horrendous med school application process. And trust me, applying to college is kindergarten by comparison to applying to med school. I know I work with a lot of my students on med school admissions, but here is a way you can guarantee your admission into a top med school. You can take either 7 or 8 years to do this particular program. It does require a minimum GPA of 4.3. Don't apply if you don't have that when you recalculate it. It does have pretty high minimum score requirements, and these are firm cutoffs. You need to have some, patient interaction experience. There needs to be lots of stuff in your extracurricular that support the fact that you are a great match for medicine. And it's typically things like shadowing in a physician's office, perhaps volunteering in a hospital or a pharmacy. Having also, by the way, usually AP Bio, AP Chem at minimum, and lots of community service, not lots of different activities, but a lot of commitment to community service to show how much you care for people. And there's a few steps to go through, but you basically do, apply as part of the Common App. It does have some extra essays. It does require things like a resume and recommendations. You will eventually be interviewed by the med school. And what it gives you is conditional admission to the College of Medicine at FAU. You will still have to take the MCAT and achieve a certain score, and you need to maintain a certain GPA once you're at FAU. And typically it's fewer than 15 students per year who get in, and they get 50 to 75 applications. And if you are a National Merit finalist or a National Merit Scholar, you do get priority in terms of, consideration for this program. The other highly competitive is their direct admit nursing, which basically says you are admitted to nursing and starting nursing courses on day one. It does have minimum requirements for test scores and GPA. And you can see, 1,200, more than 1,200 students applied. Some of them did not meet the minimum requirements. The students who were accepted had over a 4.0 GPA on average. So there are certain things that FAU is actually well known for. Engineering, computer sciences are very, very strong. And I think they have one really cool major in casino and gaming industry management. It's a certificate program, but you probably know that the gaming industry is pretty heavy duty here in Florida. So this year they set a new record for the number of applications, almost 50,000 applications, and they admitted close to half of them, and they did go to a wait list this past year. So there are some sort of backup or backdoor admissions to FAU. Basically, they are less selective than getting in regularly. And so these are, you can't apply to them, but you can be offered, admission. And you can see that their GPAs go down and their test scores go down lower than FAU in general does. But they are, programs to help ensure success of students who just have a little bit lower, grades, or test scores. You do typically enroll in the summer, and you're going part-time for the first fall, but then you are catching up and you're getting all kinds of support in these three programs. So one of the most exciting physical things on the FAU campus is this one particular building. You can see how gorgeous and ultra modern, newish. Well, it is new. It was just opened about 3 or 4 years ago. Is the Schmidt Family Complex. It's actually helped to put FAU on the map in terms of athletics, because it has wonderful athletic facilities in terms of its weight room and its practice fields. It has a wonderful virtual reality lab that you can walk through the brain. Expensive and super large, and it's right by the stadium at FAU. Also relatively new, just in the past few years, are new residence halls, both on the Boca campus and the Jupiter campus. And there is a new residence hall that is going to open 2026. So again, making more and more space available. But FAU is another one of these schools that once you get in, or even once you apply, you get your housing application in soon. They have run out of space in the past. They were housing kids a couple of years ago in hotels. So you really want to be on campus. They refer to the Student Center often as the new U. It is one of the coolest student centers that I've ever been in because of the esports arena and gaming center. It's very, very state of the art. And I can tell you it's the place to be on the FAU campus. And to me, social life on a campus is almost as important as academic life. If kids are happy socially, they're going to likely do better academically. So relatively new is that Hillel just received a $2.6 million donation to expand Hillel, which I think in today's world of anti-Semitism, it's really important for students to have a safe place. So this is a place where they can study and socialize and even have, very large Shabbat dinners. Moving a little further north, about 35 minutes or so north, to the Honors College, part of FAU, but on a separate campus, with about 500 students, where I would say there's a lot of pre-med majors, lots of health science, basically because they are close to two of the top facilities in this country for doing research. You've got the Scripps Institute and the Max Planck Research Institute, and they are right there. So students can have lots of research opportunities, which is incredibly important if they are going on to things like med school, dental school, vet school. Here's their average, GPA, or mid 50% range in terms of test scores and GPA. And this is a wonderful environment for a student who really relishes being in a much smaller, very, very interactive communities, for a college campus. There is a show on Amazon Prime that you may not know exists. It's called The College Tour. And one of the best ways, to learn more about a college is, of course, to go on tour. But if you can't get there physically to go on tour, many, many colleges have very robust websites. Perhaps one of the good things we can say about the pandemic is that colleges really enriched their websites with college tours, but the Amazon Prime show has done a wonderful college tour of FAU, and you'll see, I'll show you the other schools that are on it, but it is a great way to just, hey, tonight, turn it on and go visit FAU or one of the other schools that are available for touring. I'm going to stop for a moment and take a couple classes. I'm sorry if a couple questions. I'm sorry if I'm going quickly, but there's a lot to cover.
Someone just wanted to know whether or not the SSAR was part of the Common App or something separate.
Okay, so there's a great question. Is the SSAR part of the Common App? So the answer is no. It is completely separate. So even as you're starting to fill out, an application on the Common App, and you're applying to, let's say, UF or FAU or FSU, separate from that is the SSAR. You only complete it once, and then it can be linked to all the applications that use it. Now, what some people may sort of get it confused with is on the Common App, there's a separate page called Courses and Grades. And not every college in the country, in fact, most colleges don't require it, but there are a number of colleges that require something called Courses and Grades. It works very similarly to the SSAR. And it is true that, depending on where your kids are applying, you might be doing the SSAR for a number of our state universities. You might also be doing the SRAR, but remember, that's the same thing. You might be doing the Spark because you're applying to UCF, and UCF does not take the SSAR. And let's just say you're applying to, I hope I'm not quoting this out wrong, but I think like Purdue or University of Maryland, I believe both of those take the Courses and Grades page. So you may have 3 different times that you are filling out all 3 of these, all of these forms for your courses and grades. And I would tell you that if you have to do it for any one of these, forms, be sure that you have an official transcript in front of you. And I think that this is a 2-person job. Student on the computer typing things in, and mom or dad or sibling or best friend, they're reading off the courses and grades from the transcript and crossing them off, so that you're sure that you won't leave anything out. Any other questions at this point? Okay, let me keep going. We'll talk about Florida Gulf Coast. It is one of our newer schools. It has a very new and modern looking campus. And it really came to national acclaim when in 2013, they beat number 2 seed Georgetown. It was one of the biggest upsets ever in NCAA tournament. And by the way, I don't want to give short shift to UCF. UCF has also, FAU has done very, very well in men's basketball as well. So, what's new about Florida Gulf Coast? First of all, it has one of the highest passing rates in the country fact, the highest on the nursing school licensing exam, which means Florida Gulf Coast is doing an absolutely amazing job of preparing nursing students for their careers. I think relatively new is the runway program. It's actually an incubator, and you'll hear that word mentioned at a lot of colleges. It is to help students start new businesses. Alumni can do it as well at Florida Gulf Coast, but they have a total of $1 million in funding right now to help fund students starting brand new businesses. They haven't raised their prices at Florida Gulf Coast in 10 years. The tuition has been the same, and it's also grown pretty significantly in its 25-year history. Despite the fact that it's not one of our largest universities, it has quite a few majors and minors, including the newest majors in construction management and computer science. One of the things that I think is pretty unique there are its event management and restaurant management, golf course management programs. In fact, they have an alliance with the Ritz-Carlton, which I believe has 2 hotels over on the west coast of Florida, where kids can actually get wonderful internships at the Ritz-Carlton. And I remember my last visit there, I think I found out that the most popular course there was wine tasting. And after all, it is a school with a big emphasis on hospitality management. A number of scholarships for both in-state and out-of-state students that have just cutoffs for test scores and GPA, so you can really help for a good part of your education with a scholarship there. And the newest building on campus is the Water School. So the Water School offers majors and research opportunities that solve water quality issues, in the region. And it's actually the first building on the east, or the first, I guess, academic building on the east side of campus. So residential life at Florida Gulf Coast is pretty special. You're going to feel like you are at a resort. You're going to wonder, well, mom and dad sent me away to a resort for college. But for instance, one of them, North Lake Village, has its own lake, a boardwalk, a diner. There's a Starbucks, sand volleyball, fire pits, all the things that you would find on, let's say a waterfront type of resort. And this is a man-made lake. So what else can we tell you? Athletics are incredibly popular there, as is Greek life, but it doesn't have its own housing. Internships are super important there. And it's incredibly well known for its entrepreneurship program. So let's go over back to the East Coast and go a little further south to Florida International University, where there are 2 major campuses in the Miami area, but they also have other locations, Broward County, China. And there are a variety of pathways into admission. They used to have a pathway tool on the website that I have highlighted on the bottom, but for some reason the tool doesn't seem to be there anymore. But this particular website does explain in detail all the different pathways. And one of the sort of big differences between FIU and our other state universities is that while they do have a summer term, because for our state universities, you can typically apply for summer or fall, they don't call it summer at FIU. They call it early fall. It is the equivalent of what our other state universities call summer B, but you can enter in the summer, the summer, the fall, or the spring. And if you are in the top 10% of your graduating class, it is automatic admission to FIU. They have, just like I mentioned for I guess when we talked about FAU, some sort of programs that are slightly easier to get into. For example, let's say you want to major in engineering, but you are not even calculus ready. And by the way, most engineering programs require kids to either have had calculus or be calculus ready, which means that you've just finished pre-calc, or perhaps you've already finished, the year of calculus. And if you're looking at some of the nation's most competitive universities for engineering, they are generally looking for at least 1 year of AP calculus, preferably 2. So they have what they call a STEP program, supported transition to excellence program, for kids who are interested in, anything STEM, including engineering and business, and where you don't have to be calculus ready. So perhaps you've only gone through Algebra 2 or college algebra. You can get into one of the STEP programs at FIU for that. FIU is known as a minority-majority university. What that means is that the majority of students are underrepresented. I'm not sure that they're underrepresented at FIU, but the majority of students are minorities. Of the 5,300, and FTIC stands for First Time in College. Our state university is one of the only ones I'm aware of that uses that. Most of the FTIC kids are freshmen, but half of them are first gen, half of them are Pell Grant eligible, which means that the family income is very, very, very low. I don't know what the exact cutoff is, but these are kids who are coming from, basically financially under-resourced families. Has the highest percentage of Hispanic students anywhere in the United States. So it is truly a minority-majority university, and it was named as a first forward university basically because of the commitment to serving first-gen students. But many of our state universities have really wonderfully specialized programs to support first-gen students, kids who are the first in their family to go to college. So FIU has a program somewhat similar to FAU in terms of, medical school, a combination of undergraduate and med school. But unlike FAU, you don't apply to it out of high school. You're going to apply to it once you're already enrolled. At FIU, you'll see that we have a similar program at University of South Florida. But you will get to go, if you go through all the steps successfully, you will be at FIU's med school. And you have to be in the honors program there. You have to maintain a certain GPA, 3.6. So, that's like having mostly A's and some B's. And this is a term that kids who are applying to med school are familiar with, the BCPM. It's the biology, chemistry, physics, math GPA. And you have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. And you do start there are forms you have to fill out. Actually, they're online forms in order to make it known that you want to be part of this program. In order to actually get in, ultimately, you do have to take the MCAT, and you take it earlier typically than you would if you were just applying to med school. The average MCAT score is 500, so this is a little bit above average. You have to hit that 505, which is definitely not quite as high as the MCAT score of kids who are admitted just to regular med school, through the med school admissions process to FIU. But now the interesting thing is you do apply to FIU's med school earlier than you would normally. Normally you apply to med school at the end of your junior year. This is the end of the sophomore year, but you must apply the equivalent of early decision. And if you wind up applying to some other med school before you get a decision from FIU, you will, your guaranteed acceptance is gone. And yes, you are guaranteed acceptance if you maintain the GPA and hit that M-score benchmark of 505, which MCAT's the hardest test out there in my opinion, but 505 is not a super high score to require. They have a number of new majors. Most of them are either, are digital majors, and quite a few research labs on campus. And what I think of are some of the most interesting majors at FIU. I mean, I love the idea of cruise ship design. I mean, for those of you who've been on cruises, can you imagine how much fun it must be to design a cruise ship? They have one of the top international business programs in the country. And another very interesting major is called the Internet of Things. So if you're fascinated by the computer, but you don't want to do computer science, the Internet of Things is really a very cool major. They have a wonderful underwater program called the Medina Aquarius program. It's beneath the surface of the Florida Keys. And what's new on campus? Well, this whole College of Engineering and Computing is opening up an enormous building, very, very close, in the future. It has makerspace labs in it. You'll hear, just like I mentioned about incubators a little while ago, makerspaces are big on college campuses. There's things I know I didn't have when I went to college, where you're using a 3D printer, you're physically designing and making things. You don't even have to have a major related to the makerspace to use it. But anyway, they're supposed to have a pretty fabulous makerspace in this new College of Engineering building. And this is a phase 2 of a building. It's part of the International and Public Affairs. And Model UN is here, and they have one of the top Model UN teams in the country. They're number 3 in the country in Model UN. So for those of you who do Model UN in high school, that is a really nice thing to have on your resume applying to FIU. And you may have read recently that they renamed FIU's stadium the Pitbull Stadium because he made such a major donation. He'll be giving the school, I believe it's for the next 5 years, $1.2 million per year. And there will be lots of events, and I assume that most of them will be music events in Pitbull Stadium. So that was pretty exciting news for FIU. This is another school that had a tour on Amazon Prime. And I'm ready to move into Florida Poly, but let me see if there are any questions to be answered.
Yeah, a couple questions.
Okay.
Can you mention if you know which schools offer gymnastics?
Offer
gymnastics.
Honestly, that's a great question, but I don't know the answer. Which schools offer gymnastics? I would say the easiest thing to do is, go in and Google state universities in Florida that offer gymnastics, or if you're like me, you have a great AI program or app, I would say, on your cell phone. I have something called Perplexity that my son told me about. I use it much more than I use Google because it gives me immediate answers with references. So that's how I would find out about gymnastics.
Does applying for a summer start help students with lower than average GPAs?
Okay, so does applying for summer start help students with lower than average GPA? Yes and no. We have to take away, I think, then average. If you have a slightly lower GPA or lower test scores, I would say apply to summer. The only school where it gives you no advantage whatsoever is University of Florida. Their admission statistics for summer and fall are pretty similar. For all of our other state universities, the admission stats for summer, are lower. And the thing is, you need to go one summer to a state university in Florida. And I think it's only if you're not in an honors program, but you must go one summer in order to graduate. You don't necessarily have to go, let's say I'm a student at FSU and I started in the fall. I do have to do one summer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on the FSU campus. It could be, let's say, at the FAU campus. But I'm going to tell you that I push summer start to many of my students, even those that are very qualified to get in for fall, because why not go in the summer? First of all, it's much more fun to be on a college campus than to be home with your family, I think. You're not there for the entire summer. You get to take 2 courses. It makes it much easier to get A's when you're only taking 2 courses. But to me, one of the real benefits is I know my way around campus. I know my way around the local community. I know which professors I should be looking for their courses for the fall, which ones not to look for, which fraternity or sorority I'd like to join, where are the best restaurants in town, where are the good hangout places. So when I come back in the fall, I am one of the X number of students who have been there in the summer, and I am much less anxious about starting college with all the new freshmen who have not spent time on campus. So I think that there is a wonderful advantage to getting 2 courses out of the way and getting familiar with the university. But yes, it is, other than UF, less competitive in the summer. Okay, Florida Poly. Yes, this is really what it looks like. It reminds me of Star Trek or Star Wars. That's the IST building, the Innovation, Science, and Technology building. It is enormous, ultra modern, and you can see the range of facilities that it has in that building. That was the first building, and for a while, I think pretty much the only building that was on campus when Florida Poly first opened. And because it's relatively new, people still ask, like, well, who are the kids who go there? I want to say they were almost like, let's say, well, mathlete is the best word that I can use. These are kids who are intellectually curious, very STEM oriented, perhaps care a little bit more about their academics than they do about their social lives. Don't get me wrong, social life is still important. They're maybe a little bit nerdier. And I use that term in a positive way because I was a math major in college, and I was a cool nerd. That's all I can say. The applications have risen dramatically in Florida Poly. It's gotten an outrageous reputation, and a lot of that is because of its connection with industry, not only with industry designed academics, but with jobs and internships. So let me take you inside of the IST building. This is my own picture. I was recently on campus again, and the place is really phenomenal looking. Yes, this is the size of a classroom, a typical classroom at one of our smaller state universities, where it's almost like going to a private university because the learning is and the relationships are so interactive. My picture of the library. Now, I have to tell you that don't take it at face value because this is a pano. So there's not really 2 hallways. It's one very, very long hallway, but it was the best way to show you what the library looks like. And you may be looking at it and say, this looks pretty strange for a library. It's like, where are the books? Oh, there are no books in the library because everything is online. It's very cool. It was featured on Jeopardy very early on with, of course, the library that has no books. And all I can say is that every turn, you're just going to go, wow. I mean, this place is drop dead gorgeous, ultra modern. Well, especially if you like ultra modern. Of all of our public universities in Florida, on average, they earn the highest salaries as when they graduate. And you can see some of the really prestigious firms listed here where the kids are getting jobs. So all the majors there were designed by industry experts, not by pure academics. So the kids are really prepared for jobs when they graduate. And their newest major, very, very cool, cybersecurity engineering. So you get immersed in heavy duty STEM from their very first day on campus, and things do move at a relatively accelerated pace. Super important. Students all do a capstone project. Those are usually team-based, so you're really learning about collaboration, and every student does an internship before graduation. Leadership and finance are very much built into the learning experience there. And I just wanted to give you a list of where Florida Poly has partnerships and where kids get internships. What I showed you before is where they get jobs. But these are pretty amazing places to get internships with, which of course helps students get job offers, and often better job offers than their friends who might be at other state universities. So they do play sports there. Robotics is their largest, if you want to call it, a sports team, and they compete. I'm not sure about this, but I know that I'm sure about it. I'm not sure what it is, but in combat robotics. And they do now have 35 different student organizations, which for a smaller university is pretty impressive. So they do have more buildings now on campus than when they first opened. This is their Applied Research Center. It's the newest building on campus. It's, again, like ultra modern, very gorgeous, almost $50 million. It's somewhat patterned after the IST building, and just in terms of the way it looks. And I believe that some of the pictures that I showed you earlier about, campus have been taken in here. And this is the next building that they'll be building. It's a separate engineering building. So just lots more space for, for different kinds of labs and simulation facilities and, offices and places where students can collaborate. So Florida Poly also has lots of merit-based scholarships, which covers, a huge portion of the expense of going to school there. And now I'm moving into FSU. So admission here is really competitive. If you have a D or an F anywhere on your transcript, I'm going to tell you it's really like the kiss of death. You have to do an awful lot to make up for it. And while these are the minimums, I showed you this earlier on, how many years you need to have of each of our core plus electives in order to be considered for admission to any one of our state universities. The average admit to FSU has many, many more. So let's just take math, for example. Minimum requirement is 4 years. So what does that typically mean? Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, pre-calc. But the average student, the typical admit getting into FSU, has 5.5 years. So what does that mean? Beyond the 4 I just told you about, the 5th one would probably be calculus, and the half one would, basically saying half the kids have 5 and half the kids have 6, let's say, could mean that you have 2 years of calculus, or that you have a year of calculus coupled with, say, AP statistics. So this is the typical kid who is getting into FSU. Natural science, these are kids who don't have just 3, say the biology, chemistry, and physics. They have 5, which means that they have both honors and AP, perhaps in at least 2 of the science areas. So just to give you an idea of how competitive FSU was this year, almost 80,000 applications, and only 25% of those kids were admitted. And huge difference between in-state and out-of-state. And this is actually one of the few state universities that actually publicize its in-state versus out-of-state, admit rate. So only 13% of out-of-staters who applied got into FSU. In-state was 31%, so higher than the national, the average of 25%. And in fact, when you look at any state university, let's just say you're looking at Ohio State, just randomly picked it, and whatever their admit rate is, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but the admit rate for in-staters is typically substantially higher, and the admit rate for out-of-staters is typically substantially lower. And most of their population is going to be composed of Ohio residents. Just like in Florida, our state regulations indicate that on average, our state universities have 10% out-of-staters as a maximum. So yes, there'll be some with a bit more than 10% and some with a bit less than 10%, but overall, the goal is to achieve an average across the board of 10% here in Florida. So In the last 10 years, applications here are up 163%. That's how popular FSU has gotten. And the average number of, say, AP, IB, ACE, dual enrollment courses that an admitted student has is 10. Used to be 9, it just went up to 10. And you can see that 3/4 of the kids who are admitted have nothing but A's and B's. And honors program, I mean, 4.4 and 4.7, you can't get like a 5.0 GPA using this calculation. So they admitted 3,000 roughly out of 10,000 students who applied to the honors program. And there is an extra essay involved. You'll get it in your portal after you apply to FSU. You'll find out what that honors essay is. There's a range of deadlines, and get your cameras ready because the next page is the one that it's going to have all the data on it. Or actually just do a screen, a print screen. Remember that October 15th. So FSU was our first state university to have a deadline quite, as early as that. But you're going to have your, admission decision before Christmas, which is really nice. And if you are deferred through their early action program, you can actually submit your first semester grades. And if they've gone up, nicely, that will help your chances for admission. You need to have one test score on file before the deadline date. And you probably know that the state of Florida was one of might have been the only, but let me just say at least one of the very few states that did not go test optional for its state universities during the pandemic. Florida has always required the test scores. So let's just say that you don't have a score high enough to get into FSU. Get your application out by that early action deadline with one score, at least one score in place, because you can submit another score after the fact. Last year, they changed and said you could only apply for summer or fall, and you'd only be considered for that particular term. They've changed it back this year. You can say what your first choice is, summer or fall, but you can also indicate on your application if you'd like to be considered for the other term. So that's new based on last year. And by the way, if you're deferred, what they are thinking about, and they have not yet made a decision, is that you can submit a Why FSU video. So I don't know anything more about it because they don't either. So this is a screen you may want to save because I've listed directly from their website, every deadline. And by the way, the deadline, let's say, is October 15th for getting your application in, but your materials like your first test score, your SSAR, anything else that's needed, you have another week to get it in. But I'm giving you the information for, and that early action, by the way, is only for Florida students. Out-of-staters cannot take advantage of the early action. But I want you to have, all of the deadline dates and the latest time that you could send a score to update your file and when you'll get your admission decision. And if you decide that you want to change something about your application before they've made a decision in terms of, whether you want to be considered for summer versus fall, you can actually go in and make a change through your portal. So one of the cool things about their most popular majors is that computer science is in there. But unlike so many other schools, it is not what's called a capped major. So in other words, there's no limit to the number of computer science students, and you can transfer in. Many colleges cap their computer science major, and you cannot transfer in. You either get in from the beginning or you're not in. So at FSU, you can transfer into computer science, which has become, for most colleges, one of the 2 or 3 hardest majors to get into. So these are the most popular or most highly ranked majors at FSU. And their dance program and their film program are like beyond. They're super impressive. All of their newer majors have something to do with international studies, which I think is pretty cool. And newish on campus is the student center, completed and opened in 2022, and it's very much a cutting edge building with restaurants and bowling alley and a ballroom and club, and it's just a really fun place on campus, and it's very, very centrally located. It's another university that really supports its first gen students. They have a wonderful living and learning community to live on campus. It's only been around for a couple of years, and it really forms such a nice, cohesive group of kids who feel so at home on a college campus, even though no one in their family has, or their parents have not gone to college. And about a third, almost a third of all FSU students are first gen. Interesting. When I went to college, of course, that was back in the ice ages. Most of us were first gen, and nobody said anything about it. But first gen kids definitely have a nice advantage at our state universities. And this is their new business school building at FSU, and construction, has started. It's going to open in about a year. And one of the highlights of it will be its trading room with Bloomberg terminal, so kids can get this wonderful real world experience. I don't know any of the details yet about the real estate war room, but if you're studying real estate, it's apparently super important to have this war room on campus, and lots of collaboration spaces. And you could see pretty expensive too, $130 million. Whew. And FSU is one of the only places I'm aware of that actually has a physically separate building for entrepreneurship. It's not in the business school. So off campus, downtown, Jim Moran, very well-known car dealer, especially here in Florida, has the whole College of Entrepreneurship. And it has the three majors of commercial STEM and retail entrepreneurship, and lots of interesting minors. If you're interested in anything in terms of like running a car dealership or having a management position, they have an automotive franchising major. So it's one of the few, I think, in the country that has something like that. I'm not sure where computational science fits in, quite frankly, but it is in the College of Entrepreneurship. FSU also has a smaller, not quite as well-known campus in Panama City, almost 1,200 students, very luxurious housing, but only for 400 students. And it's still not that easy to get in. I'd say lower test scores, but average GPA is, still above a 4.0, but it is right on the water, and it is quite beautiful. So like several of the other universities we've talked about, there are pathways that if you're not accepted to the Tallahassee campus, you could be offered admission internationally or just Panama City that I just showed you. And there's a program that they've actually just renamed called the FSU Next program, where you start at Tallahassee State College and you just do one semester there. And you're also taking one course on the FSU campus. And then you're joining the Tallahassee campus. And any of these pathways, you're joining the main campus after you complete. And in fact, personally, I think it would be fun to do first semester abroad. When I was recently in Europe, I did visit, I'll show you a picture of it, the Valencia, Spain campus. And I think it might be pretty cool to start going to school there. Here's the admitted profile for this year's pathways for students. You can see the GPA is just a bit lower than regular admission to FSU, but test scores are, much lower. So this is the Valencia campus. That's actually not a campus building, but it's right across the bridge from, and that bridge goes over, don't ask me which river it is. It might be the Arno, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, I did go visit the campus, and I thought it was pretty cool to be there for first semester or first year. So FSU has one of the few summer programs that, this is not the regular going to FSU for summer, but that's easier to get into, that you can apply to. You're not selected for it. It's called the CARE Summer Bridge Program. definitely lower GPA, lower test scores. These are financially disadvantaged students, first generation, who really have a strong desire to succeed. It's a separate application in addition to the regular main common application. And it won't cost you anything to go there for the summer. You get lots of mentoring. And they did accept 585 students out of the roughly 2,000 who applied for it. So it's really nice to know about this if you are financially disadvantaged and, first gen. So these are my own pictures from a visit to FSU, and College Magazine named it one of the 10 most beautiful college campuses in America. And it does have its own circus. I believe in one of the hurricanes last year, the tent was completely ruined. I'm not sure what the rebuilding status is. I'm sorry, I did not get a chance to find out, but it is only students who are performing in the circus. So these are our students. And it has one of the highest retention rates. In other words, freshmen who return as sophomores in the country, and one of the best four-year graduation rates. You may know that many colleges, when they quote graduation rates these days, are quoting a 5 or a 6-year graduation rate, because many kids change their major multiple times or may find it difficult to get into some courses that they need. So there's a large number of students who graduate in 5 or 6 years, but look how high their freshmen love it there because they come back as sophomores, almost all of them, and they have an incredibly high 4-year graduation rate. Let me stop and see if there are some more questions. Grab some water too.
First gen means parents don't have U.S. University education or don't have a university degree at all.
Okay. So first gen is defined differently by different colleges. It could mean that neither mom nor dad ever went to college. It could mean that neither mom nor dad ever earned a 4-year degree at a college. There are almost no applications that say to you, are you first gen? Basically, what Common App does, it will ask you about mom and dad, what is the highest level of education they have had. And so you'll be able to say that they either just went to elementary school, they had some high school, they graduated from high school, they had trade school, they had some college, or they earned a college degree. And then they'll ask you how many degrees and how many universities. And so that college will decide if you qualify as first gen.
How are students evaluated when they have a very high test score, but a little lower GPA, like a 3.5?
Okay. So let's say you had a 3.5 GPA, but you had a very, very high SAT or ACT score. I think how well, your essays explain who you are and you look attractive to a university, one of our universities, based on your essays, and your extracurricular commitment is strong. I will be doing a webinar, I think just a couple of weeks, about extracurricular commitment and what colleges are really looking for, what looks great and can help you get in. So let's just say that you've got a 3.5 GPA and you've got a 1480 SAT, and you're really looking at our more competitive state universities here in Florida. If you have some good leadership, perhaps you were president of the class, or you were captain of the soccer team, or you, were president of both the chess club and the literary club, and or you had a 3 or 4 year commitment to one particular community service project, and you spent a lot of time, perhaps 70, 80, 90 hours per year on it, and you helped that community service project expand, and it was very much your doing, or perhaps you started something on your own. All of those things can make admission very possible with a 3.5. The other things may be so attractive to a university. Perhaps you are on the debate team and you've won a lot. Okay, so that would help you get in.
What are the top schools for a microbiology major or interest with the best labs and microscopes?
Okay, that's probably more detailed than I know, which is the best with microscopes and labs. I would look at the 4 schools that are the preeminent ones. Goodness, it was USF, FIU, FSU, and UF. But by the way, you don't necessarily have to go to the one that gives you the best opportunities, because if you went to one that wasn't necessarily known for biology or microbiology, you might be the one who really shines and has a better shot at getting into med school, for example.
Is it negatively looked upon if a student doesn't know what their major will be?
Oh, that's a great question. Is it negatively looked upon if a student does not know what his or her major is going to be? Absolutely not. In fact, the most popular major is undecided. And the vast majority of colleges in the whole country don't make you declare a major until the end of your sophomore year. And that's when it's official. Now, it's a little different if you're applying to nursing and you're starting nursing, your freshman year, or you're starting engineering your freshman year. Some colleges will ask you why you have picked that particular major, which means if you picked undecided, you're not going to write about the fact that you're going to be able to take all these different classes and see what really appeals to you and choose one of those. You have to write about the fact that your intellectual curiosity spans mathematics to U.S. history to theater studies, and how you'll have the opportunity to explore those 3 and determine if you're actually going to even create your own major, which almost every college lets you do, that combines, all of those 3. So it is not a disadvantage. It may be easier to justify why you're applying to a particular college if you know what the major is.
When you report your grades on the application, do you need to designate between courses taken at a regular high school versus FLVS flex?
Okay. So first of all, the question is, do you need to designate when you've taken courses at FLVS if you're, filling out, let's say, the SSAR, or you're doing the courses and grades on Common App? So the answer is yes. And in fact, on Common App, it will ask you how many high schools you have gone to. And if you've even taken one course at FLVS, and let's say you've gone to Spanish River, you actually have to say you've gone to 2 schools, and you do have to know when you started FLVS and when you finished or will finish your last course. And when you're doing courses and grades or SSAR or Spark, you will indicate 2 schools, and you're going to indicate the FLVS courses. Okay, so new college. I'm not sure why we still call it new. I mean, it's older than some of you who are listening. It's more than 50 years old. It is on the water. It has a phenomenal view. And it is our public liberal arts college. These are super intellectually curious students. They are, in some sense, like the Florida Poly student, except that these students have a very wide range of interests, in the liberal arts. Yet, despite the fact that it's a liberal arts university, every student takes career building courses and gets a career coach from day one, so that even though you're not, let's say, a business major or an engineering major, or you're a literature major, that you're going to be geared towards a job. And so parents don't complain to say, well, you're liberal arts, what are you going to do for a living? How are you going to make money? No, you're going to get that coaching there. And you can even earn a certificate in something like, finance. Cool thing. There's no core. There's nothing, that's required. And you don't get grades, but you do get a narrative description of how you've done. Hampshire College in Massachusetts does the same thing. Really small classes. You do a study abroad, and they have a special January term. It's an independent study term where you just focus on one thing that you're really interested in. And there's a senior capstone, project, very similar to what you might do if you were at Florida Poly, but in a STEM area there. And they have a great reputation for kids who get jobs right after college or who start graduate school. So there were some interesting recognitions in recent years, like that the students are the best dodgeball targets, and that it's the nerdiest college. But again, I look at nerdy as, as a positive. There is a wonderful book called Colleges That Change Lives. And this is for colleges that they're not the, Harvard, Yale, Princeton types of colleges. They're much smaller and less well-known colleges that truly can change your life. These are colleges that might be for, say, the B student. Because, today almost something like 50% of the kids graduating high school are A students. But New College made it to colleges that change lives, and it truly does change lives. They are sending many students to really top-tier law school, med schools, business schools. So something happened today, just today. So of course I just added this to the presentation, but the BOG, the Board of Governors, which sort of oversees all 12 of our state universities, today just approved a multi-million-dollar effort that will give New College more money to be able to expand and to make some other changes. So they're going to be able to receive, they didn't say how soon, but I'm assuming it's this year. It's not $15, sorry, it's $15 million. $15 wouldn't be that noteworthy. And then over the next 5 years, $200 million. Among other things, their plans are to expand the number of sports teams that they have there and increase their student athlete enrollment to about a third of the population, and basically to I'd say close to double the size of the school over the next 4 years. And you may be aware of the fact that there have been a lot of changes over the past 2 years. It does have a new, very conservative president, former House Speaker, Florida House Speaker Richard Cochran, who his responsibility was to turn this school around. There were some controversial moves initially, like eliminating gender studies. But anyway, we should see some big things happening at New College. And I just was very excited to share that with you because it only happened today. Perfect timing. And we're going to move on to UCF. So UCF has been ranked as the #1 hospitality management program in the nation, basically among the top 5 in the world. I was delighted to recently read that because I've always thought of Cornell being the top hospitality management program in the nation, but nope, it's UCF. So it is also the largest one in the nation. And part of that is because Orlando is the most visited destination. It has more hotel rooms per capita than any other city in America. And it's on a separate campus, the Rosen College, and no, that's a picture of the Rosen College. It is the largest facility ever built for hospitality management. So they have several hospitality management majors, but the newest one is the theme park and attraction management. And a student can minor, by the way, in a couple of the areas of hospitality. So there are shuttles that run between main campus and the Rosen campus. Roughly, it's about a half an hour ride between the campuses. And a Rosen student can live on the Rosen campus and feel like they're in a much more, a smaller, more intimate type of interactive environment. Or a Rosen student could live on the main campus. You could be taking courses on both campuses, no matter where you live. So one of the things that broke my heart was a little while ago, they ended what was called the Burnett Medical Scholars Program. That was a BSMD program, very, very much the same as the 2 programs that exist at FAU. So, but there is a wonderful relationship with UCF's own College of Medicine. So kids who are interested in med school, who are in the honors programs, do have a lot of, let's say, pre-health related advantages. But sadly, that BSMD program is gone. And the top 10 nights, which was a guaranteed admission program, is gone. Part of that is probably, this is just my guess, probably because UCF has become so competitive. So it is our largest university with almost 60,000, just shy of 60,000 kids, spread across 4 campuses. So we talked about the main campus in Orlando, the Rosen campus for hospitality. There's a separate downtown campus, and there is a health sciences campus. And it, besides being the largest school in Florida, it's the second largest university in the United States based on undergraduate enrollment. I believe it's either University of Arizona or Arizona State. Sorry, I can't remember which one it is, but it's one of the 2 state universities in Arizona. And here you can see the statistics, for yourself in terms of the number of kids who applied and the number of kids who were admitted. 71 National Merit Scholars who were enrolled as freshmen there. There is a wonderful relationship with NASA with their program to return to the moon. Their arena, well, it's got, I think, a really cool name. It is the Dungeon. And it seats 10,000 fans. And 17, I only got an answer from one of the schools, but only 17 of their admitted students this year submitted a CLT score instead of an SAT or an ACT score. Remember, that's the classic learning test that last year was the first year it was allowed. And by the way, you see averages for the CLT on the handout that you're going to download. It looks like this. I just printed it in black and white. It's in color. It's much prettier than this. And the screen that I showed you earlier. But you can imagine that these don't represent like hundreds or thousands of kids. They represent a small handful. And some schools didn't even provide mid 50% range for the CLT score because they felt there just weren't enough students to be representative. So here at our largest state university, only 17 of the admitted students submitted only the CLT score. So you can see our hot majors and our newest majors. And UCF doesn't really stand for University of Central Florida. It stands for Under Construction Forever. So unusual that a college creates an entire new campus. So this is, I probably won't talk about it in future years. This will probably be the last year I talk about it. But they did open about 5 years ago their newest campus downtown Orlando. And what they decided to do was to have majors that were related to the industries that were downtown so that kids could walk to their internships, or their jobs. So there's a limited number of majors. It's a great way to go to UCF, be in a major city, in the heart of a major city, and not feel overwhelmed by so many thousands of students. So that is the residence hall downtown. It is the only residence hall. Otherwise, you live in an off-campus apartment. But further to the Under Construction Forever, these are all recently completed. Okay, so look how many projects there were recently, completed, and these were big projects. They've got 5 projects now that are either, big projects that are either under design or under, construction. And sort of the most exciting one that is under design and construction, which is going to open in a year, is their new nursing pavilion. And this is on their health sciences campus in Lake Nona. UCF is also featured on Amazon Prime for the college tour. Moving to UF. So that's Allie, and he's the world's first AI alligator. He's been around for a little while now, but AI has really become a centerpiece. Basically, AI is infused into pretty much everything you can do now academically at UF, and you can even earn a certificate in AI no matter what your major is. And in fact, it's one of the first universities anywhere in the country to infuse AI courses across the curriculum. And you can see 300 faculty members, teach AI courses or use AI in their research. So there are basically 200 courses across all majors that are, very AI focused. So this is their newest building on campus. It's for data science and information technology. It just opened, almost a year ago now. So, but maker spaces, majors for computer science, engineering is in here. The whole Florida Institute for Cybersecurity is here. Pretty like drop dead gorgeous, very ultra modern building that looks a little different than the rest of campus. So they have a special AI computer, and it's called the Hypergator AI computer, and it is one of the most powerful AI supercomputers in the world. Couldn't even get the whole computer into the picture. Okay, so I answered this before. There is no advantage to applying for summer at UF, and there's a lot more demand for fall. UF does not admit by major. I can't tell you if I completely believe this, because I would have to believe that they're looking for more STEM when you're applying for, say, a computer science or an engineering major, but they claim not. And they are very emphatic that as soon as possible after you file your application to UF, if you want to live on campus, like within 1 week, maybe 2 weeks at the most, please file your housing application. It does require a $25 non-refundable deposit. So even if you don't get into UF, you don't get back your housing deposit. But it is the only way to almost guarantee getting housing on campus. Did I miss one? Yeah, their honors program. It does have one additional essay. Unlike FSU, which gives it to you on the portal, UF gives it to you in the application. Amazingly high test scores and GPA to get in. And they do have a new honors village that opened, but I don't believe it's 100% complete yet. It's a living and learning community with all kinds of special events, and 1,400 students live there. So UF, like all the other schools, has different pathways of getting in that are a little bit less selective. So the first one is the Innovation Academy, where it's a spring-summer calendar, which means you're not going in the fall. You're going from January until August. So you're not taking classes on main campus, say, during football season. But during that football season, during the fall season, you can be doing a study abroad, you can be doing research, doing an internship, and it's been around for about 11 or 12 years now. It only has select majors. These are all the current majors, and they all have every single major has the same minor. You have to minor in innovation, and every one of their courses has things about creativity, entrepreneurship, design, etc. And their newest track is AI, artificial intelligence. Here are the admission stats for the kids who are in the current Innovation Academy. And you can see the percent admitted is higher, higher than regular UF. The GPA, SAT, and ACT are definitely lower. There's another program called PACE. I apologize, I do not have this year's data. They never responded to my email asking for it. But you basically start online, and you either have to do 2 semesters or 15 credits online, and you need a total of 60 credits, which includes like your AP and IB, ACE, and dual enrollment courses from high school in order to move onto main campus. But you do start online. Then there are these different sort of like pathway types of programs. There's 2 different engineering programs that start out either in Santa Fe College, which is right there in Gainesville, or you start at the State College of Florida, which is over on the West Coast in the Sarasota area. Those are both like engineering, computer science related programs. And then there's one on design and construction, also at Santa Fe College. They are very committed again to first gen and low income students. They have 2 different programs where you can be accepted to if you're coming out of a Title I or similar high school. Basically, you don't take any loans, and really just first gen low income students, they very much help them succeed at UF, and they do start in the summer. They have had a lot of students, graduates, alums, in the Olympics. They've won 156 medals over time, and one of the largest freshman classes around. I mean, almost 7,000 kids in the freshman class, more than in, I think, probably any public high school here, in Florida. And the world's most popular sports drink was invented there. I only learned that a couple of years ago. I never really thought about it. Like Gatorade, the Gators, University of Florida. That's where it was invented. And what many people feel is most special there is the Swamp. It's their football stadium, and it's the 12th largest football stadium in the country. So for several years, but not this last year, it was ranked in the top 5 of state universities in the country. Places like UCLA, Berkeley, what else was in there? UVA, University of Michigan. Can't remember what the other one was. Basically, there were 6 in the top 5, but a couple of them were tied. They're currently ranked as of last year's ranking, and the new one is coming out, I think, next week. The number 6 state university in the country, and it's tied. So there's 3 number 6s with University of California at Davis and at San Diego. That's why more and more out-of-state students are interested in University of Florida. First of all, they're picturing, balmy weather. Well, it is, I guess, a lot balmier than it would be in Massachusetts or New York or Oregon. But it has become wildly popular because of its very high ranking by U.S. News and World Report. There's a brand new ranking that has just come out. It's not a new ranking. It's just new. It just came out recently for this year, Forbes, and it ranked at the number 4 state university in the country. And it's called one of 10 new Ivies. Jason, any?
No. Good.
Okay, so let's go up to Jacksonville, to University of North Florida, and that's a pretty nice lazy pool that you can have right behind your dorm. Has 6 flagship programs. Their nursing program is incredibly strong, and their transportation and logistics are very strong. This is at the crossroads of 2 major highways in this country. I-95, Florida Turnpike. I mean, both north-south, they both go right through Jacksonville. And then I think it's the 5 or the 10. I think it's the 10 that goes all the way from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. Well, from your perspective, I guess it goes this way. You can see what the most popular majors are for its freshmen, and it just added a new degree in cybersecurity. That's popping up all over the place. So I just learned this year that Jacksonville is Florida's largest city. I thought Miami was the largest city, but it's not. Jacksonville is. And a lot of it is because there's tremendous business migration to places that are low tax, and therefore they're business welcoming, like Florida. And so it has become the hub for many companies that are focused on fintech, which is, financial technology. So there's undergraduate academics, and there's a Bachelor of Science in fintech. There's a fintech minor if you're in computer science. There's also a fintech minor for kids who are in finance. And they do have what's called this fintech academy at University of North Florida, and it's classes, it's research. There's partnerships between the university and many firms. And what did you say? It had more firms than anything?
Fortune 500.
The Fortune 500. There's more Fortune 500 companies in Jacksonville than anywhere else.
It might be different now after COVID.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was before COVID, but who knows, it might be even higher now after COVID because so many companies have moved to Florida. So much more of an open environment. So if you're interested in anything related to finance or technology or business, UNF may be the place for you. So Jacksonville was rated as one of the top places to live in this country. You're only 15 minutes from the beach, 20 minutes from the airport. And if you have friends at FSU, you're just 2 hours away. There was recently a patent awarded to professors who identified a gene that basically can stop certain types of cancers from attacking the body. Has big sorority and fraternity life, and it is considered a very, very safe place for the LGBTQ population. They were named by Fiscal Times as having one of the top public colleges with luxurious dorms. Princeton Review rated it as best, one of the best in the South. And it also has a direct entry nursing program that is just about as competitive as FAU's. Also, their business school, Coggin, you may know that name from automotive industry, is also named as a top business school. And they were also featured on Amazon Prime for a tour. Moving back over to the other coast, to USF, Tampa. Well, actually, it's more than Tampa. It's Tampa, St. Pete, and Sarasota, Manatee, 3 colleges. And you can see Tampa's the largest, followed by St. Pete. St. Pete is downtown, right on the water. It's a very, very cool environment. Much smaller classes in Sarasota, Manatee, and St. Pete. And St. Pete and Sarasota. And Tampa is the most competitive admission of all 3 of them. They do have a 7-year BSMD program, and you actually apply to USF and the Honors College, but you have to email a declaration of intent partway through your freshman year. And it does require keeping a minimum GPA and science GPA while you are a student at USF. And you can't apply for it without having, minimum test scores and GPA. You do wind up filing an application as a sophomore, like at the end of your sophomore year, to their med school. And you do have to meet an MCAT benchmark. You can see this one's much higher at 515. That's a pretty high MCAT score. But again, minimum criteria in order, requirements. You have to meet these minimum requirements, and they're not so minimum. They're pretty high. But the kids who are getting in, that 3.89 is their overall average. That was on all kids admitted to their med school. Morsani Med is USF's own med school. So they're looking for the 3.9 GPA kid with an average MCAT of 518, which is very, very high. So it's not an easy med school to get into, but there is this dual program for kids in the honors who are committed to pre-med. They have a number of dual degree programs, BSDO, which is osteopathy, and DMD dentistry programs with LECOM, which is Lake Erie College of Medicine. It has one campus, Florida, and the other one I think is Pennsylvania. They also have a 3+3 law school program with Stetson. Normally it would be 4 years of undergraduate and 3 years of med school. So it does cut a year off of your bachelor's. And you can see double degrees with audiology, pharmacy, and nursing. A couple of new facilities on campus and new major in supply chain management, which is engineering, business engineering combination, and hospitality is a new major at University of South Florida. And what's really new is their College of Artificial Intelligence, Cybersecurity, and Computing. It launched a year ago, and you can get a major, a minor, a certificate, and just cybersecurity is becoming super hot. And this is the first college of its kind in Florida, and one of the first in the nation to just be a college that's AI, cybersecurity, and computing. So they have raised their rank in U.S. News and World Report more than any other college over the last 12 years. And they are, last year were ranked highest by USF, third highest in the state of Florida in terms of publics. Very strong research school because they have 4 hospitals on or next to colleges, which has, great opportunities for research and internships for pre-med students. And some pretty cool things about them. The one I think is the coolest is that they are incredibly well ranked in terms of the number of patents. And the schools that have more patents than them, you can see, are all very, very prestigious, like MIT and Stanford and Johns Hopkins. And Forbes named Tampa, where their main campus is, the #1 emerging tech city in the US. They also have fabulous beaches nearby. Whew, getting to the end. University of West Florida football stadium actually is on the water. They are up in the Panhandle, and you can see their most popular majors for freshmen and, research, mentorship, fieldwork, all very, very big. And they do have an honors program as well. This is also one of our smaller state universities, not as small as, say, New College or Florida Gulf Coast, but relatively small. They have an investment program there where the kids actually manage a live $1 million bond fund and a $500,000 stock fund. So it's not a simulation. They're actually managing the university's money. Excuse me. They only a few months ago came in second in national competition. I think Quinnipiac University from Connecticut has a national competition every year, and they came in second out of 150 universities. So kids are pretty well trained at University of West Florida. It is one of the less competitive colleges we have in admission. It's not competitive, but just less than the others. It's our only state university in a different time zone. They're closer to Alabama than they are, to us here in South Florida. And they're also the only NCAA Division II team in the state university. And they were named the #2 most scenic stadium on the water. That I showed you that as the initial screen. And recently they were awarded almost $1 million by Governor Ron DeSantis and his wife to support research. Last year they had record-breaking applications. Very small classes, 25 students for freshman classes, 19 students in upper level classes. And if you love the outdoors, there's a great nature park right there, lots of hiking and biking trails and lots of recreational activities. This is definitely for the truly outdoorsy kid. They have scholarships, which you can earn starting at a 3.7 GPA out of high school, both for in-state, and they treat Alabama the same as Florida, basically because they're so close to Alabama, but in-state, out-of-state scholarships, but you've got to apply by December 1st. So in general, there are plenty of other pathways to admission. This sort of summarizes all of them. It's another screen you might want to do a screenshot of if you're looking for like what are sort of the back doors, in. The FIU Golden Scholars Program, like the CARE Summer Bridge from FSU, is one that you can apply for. All of the others, you have to just be invited. So we have a pretty large, what used to be called community college system. They're not called community colleges anymore. They're called state colleges because they give 4-year degrees, but we have 28 of them. And there is an articulation agreement between our state colleges and our state universities that after 2 years at a state college, it is guaranteed admission to a state university, although not necessarily to the one of your choice. You have to have earned an AA degree, which is what you call the 2-year degree, in order to get into one of our state universities. But there are specific transfer programs, like, for example, what is now called Aspire TCC to FSU, is if you're in this program, it guarantees you after 2 years on the Tallahassee, it used to be called Tallahassee Community College, but it basically guarantees admission into FSU. So these are all guaranteed transfer programs, and that is one of the downloads, is more details about all of these transfer programs. And so I'd like to just finish up by talking about the national college rankings and how Florida stacks up. So this is based on last year's U.S. News and World Report. And I don't want you to think that just because you're ranked number 15 means you are better than number 87. It really just means that you are well thought of on the national scene. So 6 of our colleges have been very, 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 top ranked. National rank is comparing them to both public and private. The public rank is only comparing them to other publics. So you can see that University of Florida is in the same ballpark as Berkeley, UCLA, Michigan, UNC, UVA, which are often considered the very prestigious state universities. But also I want to show you that FSU is way up there as well. Yes, there are a bunch of universities in between, but it's up there in, let's say, the top 25 state universities. And by the way, the rank on all of these are all our state universities that were ranked last September. So what do we have? 3, 6, 9 of them. 9 out of 12 were ranked by U.S. News, and every single one of them improved the rank over the previous year. Okay. 2 of them were only ranked, I shouldn't say only, they were ranked regionally. Okay. These were ranked nationally. These were ranked regionally, incredibly well thought of. And one of them was ranked in terms of liberal arts. So all 12 have been ranked by U.S. News and World Report. 9 of them were ranked in business. And again, like number 62 is not better than 276. It really just means that this has national recognition. All 12 got engineering recognition. It's really pretty special. And if you're interested in future presentations or past presentations, everything that we've done is on our website, and you'll be able to download any handouts for them and play those webinars to be able to hear more on the idea of tonight's, although I can promise you that none of them are quite as long. And I'll just see if there are any other questions for this evening.
I've replied to a bunch of things online. So my daughter goes to a high school where she's able to shadow medical professionals her junior and senior year. Would that be something that FAU would consider?
Okay, so that was great. The question was, my daughter goes to a high school where she can shadow medical professionals her last 2 years of high school. Would that be something that would be considered by FAU? Yes, basically that would fall under the kinds of extracurricular commitment that they are looking for, healthcare, very healthcare related. Of course, she still has to have, the grades and the scores.
There was a fair amount of confusion about the Bright Futures versus application and how Bright Futures recalculates and whether or not your scores are necessary to get Bright Futures. So can you just clarify some stuff there?
Yeah. Okay. So Bright Futures definitely requires test scores, SAT, ACT, and I believe now CLT. Definitely requires a certain GPA. However, that GPA is calculated very differently than the one that I've been talking about tonight, because it doesn't count all of your core. It is only core, but there are a certain number of years of, English, math, science, social science, and world language at a minimum that you have to include. So and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I apologize.
It's 16 total class.
It's 16 total. But let's say that you've taken 6 years of math. Okay, not unusual. They only require, I think, 3 or 4, but you can use more because you can use extra years from a particular subject. But they are using fewer years of subjects. So basically, you may be able to throw away like a C or a D or something, and it doesn't count. But you still need, a pretty high GPA, a pretty high test score, and you also need a certain number of hours of extracurricular commitment or work commitment, or a combination, of the two. We do have a webinar on our website about Bright Futures, and we will be doing it again. And you can't apply for Bright Futures until, I believe, second semester senior year, and your guidance counselor should be explaining how to go about that application.
And you don't actually need scores or GPA if you get an IB or ACE diploma.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'm being assisted here, and it's more than assisted, I can tell you, because I couldn't set this up completely on my own. But my son Jason, who runs all of our schools and our learning centers and oversees a lot of the work that we do, basically just reminded me that if you have an ACE diploma or an IB diploma, it is automatic Bright Futures.
If only driver's ed was taken on an FLVS, does that need to be reported on the SSAR?
If only driver ed was taken on FLVS, does that need to be reported on the SSAR? Think about what you think I'm going to answer you and see if you're right. The answer is yes. Every high school course you've taken must be reported. And even if you took the high school course in middle school, there's a place for it on the SSAR. There's a place for it on the courses and grades section of Common App, and there's a place for it on the Spark.
If you're applying to UF and FSU, what's better, an A in an honors class or a B in an AP class? With the recalculation of the GPA, it almost seems like you're being penalized taking AP.
Okay. So regardless, the question is, really what's better, the A in the honors class or the B in the AP class? And it's true that you're going to get a bigger bump with, I think, the B in the honors class will give you 3 for the B, and the honors gives you a half, so it's 3.5. The A in the honors class gives you 4.5 because it gives you an A gives you 4, and the honors gives you a half, so you have 4.5 points. However, the B in the AP course gives you 3 points for the B and a full point for the AP. So that's 4 points as opposed to 4.5 points. So you're likely to have a slightly higher GPA, but understand, with the honors course. Yes, with the honors course, you're going to have a higher GPA, but strength of curriculum, and they don't put that into the admission criteria, formally to say that, you must have, X number of more advanced courses, and more advanced would refer to, AP, IB, dual enrollment, and ACE. But strength of curriculum is incredibly important. Remember when I showed you that screen about FSU, and to show you how the average kid who gets into FSU has 10 of these either AP, IB, ACE, or dual enrollment courses. So a kid who doesn't have any AP or IB, let me leave dual enrollment out for a minute, AP, IB, or ACE, but has straight A's, might not, even though their GPA is in range, doesn't have as good a chance of getting in as the kid who has, let's say, a lot of dual enrollment, because many of our universities consider some of the dual enrollment courses to be not as hard as AP, like ENC 1101 or 1102 are not nearly as hard as, say, AP Lang and AP Lit. So strength of curriculum is more important than GPA. And if you don't have strength of curriculum, but you do have the right GPA, your chances are not as good as someone who has a little bit lower GPA, but has a much stronger strength of curriculum.
Do we have reciprocity to any out-of-state schools?
I don't believe we have any reciprocity to out-of-state universities. unless you work in a university and that university has a reciprocity.
That's it.
Okay, so sorry I went so fast. There's some great handouts. Please remember to download them. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us. Hope you enjoyed this evening's webinar, and that you'll perhaps consider us for college planning or help with your applications or your essays or your resume or any aspect of it.